Hello, Miss Funk here, and we are going to learn about sculpture today. So, you might be wondering, what is sculpture? And it is the only branch of the visual arts that is specifically concerned with expressive three-dimensional form. So, when we talk about sculpture, we are talking about work that is either a relief, so it stands apart from the background, or sculpture in the round, which means you can walk around it. But either way, it has three-dimensional form. So the definition of sculpture is that it is three-dimensional forms created by modeling, carving, or assembling. And when we say three-dimensional, we mean that it has height, width, and depth. So you can see in the diagram the difference between the blue 2D square versus the 3D cube. The cube has height, width, and depth. So in the past, traditional sculptures were very representational, meaning that they looked like what they were supposed to look like. So if we had a sculpture of a person, it would look like a person. Oftentimes, it was created with no movement, carved or modeled out of just one solid material. Whereas the more modern characteristics of sculpture, sculpture can be representational and abstract. And it can also be solid, static, or use empty space in an important way and capable of movement or kinetic. And we'll talk more about some of those examples in a bit. And it's also carved, cast, modeled, assembled, or constructed in a variety of ways. So after today's presentation, you'll see kind of more of the modern take on sculpture and hopefully get a better understanding of just kind of the variety that we can get when we are creating sculptures. So there are two basic forms. One is sculpture in the round or a freestanding sculpture. So that is art that is meant to be viewed from all sides. And then there's also relief sculpture. And under that umbrella, we can have high relief versus low relief. And that is when the sculpture projects from a background surface. So here's an example of a relief sculpture. As you can see, the objects in this sculpture stand out from the background, but it's not like we can walk, around this sculpture. So it is a good example of a relief sculpture. Here's another example as well. And another example of a relief sculpture. Now, sculpture in the round, think walk around. So these are sculptures that if they're small enough, you can pick up and kind of turn it around in your hand. Or if they're large sculptures, you can actually walk around the sculpture and see every side. Here is an example. So when we construct sculptures, there are 8 main ways to do so. So first, we'll talk about carved sculptures, modeling, cast, constructed, assembled, kinetic, environmental, and installations. So with a carved sculpture, the artist uses tools to shape something from a material by scraping away portions of that material. So in the first horse example, you can see that this was created out of carving a piece of wood. Our Abraham Lincoln and the statue on the right, the Michelangelo, were carved out of stone. So this is when the artist would take one solid piece of material and just slowly and gradually chip away at the material until they're left with their intended outcome. With modeling, these are sculptures made by shaping forms from soft workable material. So you can see in these examples, these are created using clay, where the artist is doing both carving, but also, putting pieces of clay on the work to make certain things stand out. Now, constructed sculptures are built from traditional or industrial materials shaped by the artist. So a more traditional material would be something like stone. An industrial material would be more like steel. The parts may be of a single material, such as a metal, or a variety of different materials. So you see our examples here. The Statue of Liberty on the right is an example of a constructed sculpture. And then our Picasso the Statue of Liberty on the left, the Picasso on the right are examples. With assemblage, these are sculptures that are constructed from a variety of ready-made materials and objects not often intended for making art. So these are really fun to make, especially if you're at home. You can go on a little scavenger hunt and just start to pick pieces that might work well together to create a new object. And then you attach those pieces together depending on the material. So you can use things like glue, cement, string, wire. There are many different options. Now, kinetic sculptures, I have this video just to kind of show you the movement of the kinetic sculpture. So these are created for the purpose of showing movement, and oftentimes it is wind that causes this movement. You can just see the movement in that sculpture made out of metal. And then environmental sculpture is a sculpture usually created from natural materials, and they are out in the open air. And there are also sculptures that typically have some type of interaction with the environment. So, as you see on the example on the left, you can actually walk through those hay sculptures. And then with the wave example on the right, you could go in and pretend that you were surfing and take a photo. So there's a lot of interaction with environmental sculptures. The same goes for installation. So with an installation, the artist uses various materials that can be permanent or not. You know, sometimes they're meant to be impermanent, and they are not confined to gallery spaces, and they often interact with public environments. So you can see the example on the left, you could actually walk through all of those metal kind of wires and circles. And then the example on the right is actually in process of being constructed, but it's on the side of a building where you could, walk around the sculpture as you can see the people there.